PainKiller. It's a CBS 2 original docuseries. It was 40 years ago this week. The Tylenol murders rocked Chicago and the nation. 7 deaths from tainted Tylenol. And all these years later, the investigations continue with no solid answers.
The CBS 2 investigators have spent months digging through our archives, interviewing a number of the key figures in the case. And now tonight we have 2 guests joining us. Former CBS 2 journalist Ed Marshall. He was actually working our assignment desk when he learned of a later press conference involving these deaths. That's where the medical examiner spelled out the deadly details. We were also joined by CBS 2 investigator Dorothy Tucker. She's been following this case through our docuseries PainKiller, and Dorothy continues our coverage tonight at 10 p.m. with a special report. So first, Ed, if I can turn to you, being that you were here at the time and you heard these details as they were coming down, why was this a story that really rocked not just the nation, but the entire world in many ways?
Well, you can't imagine anything more devilish than what was done. These capsules were laced with cyanide in a random fashion, and so that the victims were not targeted. The whole point was to terrorize people. And that's exactly what happened, because there was no explanation at first for how this could happen. Was it an accident at one store? Was it intentional across the entire product line? Everyone in Chicago essentially could have been a victim. And at some point it went national. And so you can imagine that people were terrified.
Dorothy, so much has changed when...
On that, and add to that, and I had a chance, as you know, in the story you see, to talk to the Illinois Attorney General at the time, who was Ty Fainert. And what was interesting is that he pointed out that he was getting phone calls from around the country and around the world. There was fear of copycats from Germany and UK. They had some incidents. They were concerned that they might have some incidents, and if something happens, what should they do? What was going on there? What led up to this? They were calling him seeking answers. And you also had poison hotlines, and definitely in the Chicago area they were flooded, but there were also hotlines in California and in Tennessee, in Philadelphia. People were calling in, just expressing all kinds of concerns, because again, if it happened in Chicago, it could have happened anywhere. Because remember, Tylenol was a product that was sold around the country and in parts of the world. So this was definitely a story that was national, a story that was international, because everybody was afraid.
Ed, what do you remember most about being in the newsroom when this was happening? I started to ask Dorothy, but so many things have changed in the 40 years with the way news is consumed.
Yeah, back then, all we had were two-way radios and telephone. We didn't have cell phones. We did not have texting capability. There was no internet. You had to get news the old-fashioned way. And all you had, in this case, the first thing that I noticed was there was a bulletin that came over from the medical examiner from the night before with these unexplained deaths on the overnight sheet. And that looked suspicious. And no one could tell us what was wrong, why these people suddenly died in Arlington Heights and Palatine. And then later that next day, there was a teletype message that came over about a press conference talking about Tylenol poisonings. And of course, without any backstory, without any instant analysis, you just had to jump on these things and pursue them. One of the things that I found myself doing was going through these reverse telephone directories. Once I had the addresses of those 7 people, I tried to find witnesses, neighbors, friends, somebody who might have had real information about these individuals. Why did they die? What happened to them? What was the mystery? Was there an explanation? This was jump on the phone, dial these numbers, hope somebody would talk to you, and then by that time we would identify a reporter or 2 or 3 or 4 and send them out and see if they could get interviews with some hard facts on what really was happening during this terrible, deadly mystery.
So, Dorothy, I know a lot of your piece is really taking us step by step through these shocking details, but was there anything in reviewing this case? So I know that you've been in this market for decades, so you were definitely familiar with it. Was there any new detail that stood out to you?
What struck me was the Chicago Defender. This was a story that was really initially, the first day or so, it was something that happened in the northwest suburbs. So the Tribune, the Sun-Times, their headlines were Tylenol across the front page. But the Chicago Defender had a story about it, but their story was kind of in the corner, because in the Black community, Harold Washington was considering throwing his hat in the ring for mayor at that time. And Tenta Strasberg, who I had the opportunity to interview, she covered politics. And then she says she gets this phone call about this press conference, and it's these murders. So of course she puts aside what she's doing and she covers the press conference, but it doesn't make the top headline. It kind of ends up in the corner. And then it was also interesting to talk to her about the response from the Black community. I mean, these stories have been done in the past where people look back, but I think this is the first time in our story that you're really going to get an idea of how the Black community responded and how the city responded in terms of making sure that the Black community and the Hispanic community and everybody knew about this, you know, because the most important thing was to get the word out to everybody. And in our story tonight, we will show you just how they did that across the board.
Ed, what do you make of the magnitude of this 40 years later, talking about it again all these years later, and what other people who were involved or connected with this case in one way or another are talking about all these years later?
Well, it's really a horror story, and horror has a grip on our souls. And I think that's what happened. Because it was so mysterious, because there was no instant explanation, it wasn't like a mass shooting where it begins and it's over. This thing went on and on and on with no credible answer for a long, long time. And of course it still has a fascination. All indications are that they have a suspect, and that suspect is the same person who's been there all along. The issue now is there going to be justice for those 7 families? We don't know that, but certainly this is the sort of story that lives on.
Yeah. Well, Dorothy, Ed, thank you both for taking this time to walk us through the details of what happened so many years ago. And Dorothy, I know you will have a full report. We don't want to miss it coming up tonight on the CBS 2 News at 10.
Thank you both.